I do want to say is thanks for asking me to do this. I think, but I just said to Louisa, I just don't even know what to talk about, and so he turns to Doug, who is the master of asking questions. I don't know, Carissa, if you figured that out, but I just think really when he asks questions. So he wrote down some questions for me, and it gave me some confidence, and so I thought, oh, okay, I can talk about a few things. So the very first question he wrote down was memories of Marion, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. I don't have too many of those, but the ones I remember are pretty vivid. We moved from Marion when I was in my 8th year. I had just been baptized that winter, and we moved in the spring. So I was basically 8.5 years old. And some of the things that I remember about Marion, most everything I remember about Marion was very happy and positive and just kind of an idyllic childhood in many ways. I lived there, and Doug and Louise and Ken and Jim all lived at Grandma's house, and I lived there a fair amount of the time, apparently, because a lot of my memories are at her house. But one thing I do remember that was way fun was when I was just little, I was always following the boys around, and I don't know that I even hardly realized I was a girl. I was just one of the crowd, but I was the little one. And we went porcupine hunting one day. Well, I don't think we actually started out porcupine hunting. I think we were just exploring, and we'd gone up to the Upper Luther. And while we were there, there were a bunch of trees on the edge there at the east side, and we went in there. We were playing and building a hut. And Jim and Clint and Roy found a porcupine up in a tree. And they decided that porcupines weren't good animals, or they were the enemy or something, but they decided to knock that porcupine out of the tree, and they eventually clubbed it to death. And I stood on in horror and watched it. The whole time, them telling me, don't let it touch you, don't let it get close to you, because you'll get quills in you, and they hurt. So I was just a spectator, but I watched them take that porcupine down, and then we didn't leave it there, and they just had the hunting spirit in them, and they tied a twine on it and hauled it, drug it all the way back to the house, which at that time in my life felt like maybe it was 2 miles, but as I look at Marion now, it was maybe a quarter of a mile. It was a high adventure and great fun, and I just still remember that so vividly. Another thing I remembered is that we lived next door to the Wellers, and as little kids, we were, well, I maybe shouldn't say we were afraid of them, but I was afraid of them. And once again, you know, the boys were just always telling me these big, scary stories about the Wellers and about John Singer. But nevertheless, they obviously weren't as afraid as I was, because I followed them over there one day, and we went into their grove, and they had a metal cover on, I guess it was their spring. And Doug may have been with us on this one too. Do you remember this, Doug?
Not specifically.
Okay. It sticks in my mind that you might have been there as well. But we went over there, and they got big sticks and started to pound on that covering for the well, and or the spring or whatever it was, and it just resonated through their grove. And that was so fun and so exciting until John Singer comes walking up through there just screaming at it and carrying his gun. And I was terrified. so was everybody else, and they took off and ran. I was the littlest one, and I ran too. But they crawled under the barbed wire fence and got away, and I tried to crawl under, and I got caught. And I thought I was going to die. I truly thought that man was going to shoot me, and I was panicking and screaming at the top of my lungs. And Roy came back and helped me get uncaught, and we escaped, and none of us actually died. But later on, when John Singer became such an issue, that would always come up in my mind, what had happened that day. Another incident with the Singers was, now I really liked that they had another nephew or someone that lived with them that was younger. And I can't remember his name.
Was either Hans or Fritz?
I did not. I did Hans. I don't remember. There was one of them that used to come over and talk me into racing Bud with him up the Range Gate Road. Now, Grandpa had given specific instructions that I shouldn't race Bud, but that kid came over and he enticed me to race him. He had a nice horse too, a fast horse, and he would get me to race with him. And I was maybe 6 years old. That's not very big. But he'd come over and we'd start at the Range Gate Road, and then he'd bust it loose, and then Bud would go. And I couldn't stop him. I just rode him. I couldn't stop him, but I do have to report that he never beat Bud. I don't know if I ever beat him, but he never beat Bud. And I was always pretty darn proud of that. Grandpa was not, but I was.
Linda, was the horse that kid rode, was that Tony, the horse with the glass eye?
Yeah. Yeah, it was Tony.
One little comment here. Ken, you tell me if this is correct. What we called Weller's Grove was some aspens east of their house, and that structure that Linda's talking about was the covering for the well, but that's where we got our culinary water too, wasn't it? Didn't Pa and Uncle Willard put that well house over that spring house over that spring?
Yeah, it was not a well. It was the spring. You're right. It provided the culinary water for them and for us. But it was on Weller's property.
And when it started, it would have been Uncle Willard that owned the property, right? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That lends some interest to me too. I thought we were just totally trespassing, but I guess just partially, huh?
You were banging on your own shed.
In their grove.
Uh-huh.
All right. Oh, I have another John Singer story, and this one, I think Jim and I were together when this one happened. So the sheep used to, graze in that east pasture, and sometimes they'd crawl through the fence and go over and get in Singers, and or in the Weller's pasture. And Jim and I had been sent up to go, I guess, turn them back, or maybe we were just up there playing. I don't know for sure. I don't remember that part. What I do remember is that John Singer came riding up through there on, I think, Tony. And he was just screaming. He had his gun, and he was shooting it into the air. I mean, at this point, I assume he was probably shooting his gun to scare the sheep out of their pasture back into ours. But Jim and I thought that he was coming to shoot us. So we crawled. We were on our side of the pasture, and I can remember crawling down in the ditch and just laying as flat as we could so that we hoped again, it was one of those days I thought I might die, and I was scared, but I did not dare get up and run. And Jim may have been a whole lot more cool about it and just thought it was funny, but for me, it was high adventure.
Do you remember it, Jim?
John Singer was not riding Tony, he was riding his bay horse. He come up the road, going as fast as the horse could go, wearing a fridge, jacket, scarf, flapping. Sword flapping down his hips. Yeah. He's got a pistol in his hand. Well, I remember that happening, sitting there when he came up with his gun shooting, and the next day, Dad checked on one of the lambs because it was limping and found a hole through his hock.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So he wasn't necessarily just shooting in the air, I guess. Anyway, we kids assumed that John Singer shot him. May have been so. They cut it on the fence and something else too.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Even in Boren Valley story. I know I was scared to death of the man. He really, really did scare me. And later, when he got into so much trouble with the law, I was relieved. I was relieved that that was no longer a threat. I just every time I hear his name, I would just think of those incidents. Another thing that I really loved about my years in Marion was Ross and Winnie's family, and especially Millard. Millard and I were the same age, and we went to school together, and we were best friends together, and it was just so much fun to play with him. He'd come up to our place, we'd go down to his place. And his mom I thought she was a real sophisticated lady. But when we'd go down to his place, we weren't supposed to go out and play with the calves because we'd come in stinking, she said. So, but for whatever reason, Millard could not leave the calves alone, and I couldn't leave Millard alone. So we ended up out in their calf pen, and we were riding the calves. Again, something we weren't supposed to be doing, but we did. They were just all there in their barn, and so we'd just jump on those calves and ride them. Mostly we fell off, but it was a lot of fun, and so then we went back in the house to eat, and his mom said, "Millard, have you been out to the calves?" And Millard said, "No." And she said, "Millard, have you been out to the calves?" And he said, "No." She looked at me and she said, "Linda, have you and Millard been out to the calves?" And I didn't say no. I just shook my head no. And she disciplined us rather sharply. And I could not figure out for the life of me how she knew we were lying to her. Could not figure it out until I was older and realized that when you're out in the calf pen, you have manure all over your feet and you smell like it. So we kind of learned the lesson then, but the lesson I learned is that mothers know when you're lying. Another thing I remember that was really sweet for me about Marion in those early years was Joe Taylor was there a lot. And, you know, I was 4 or 5 years old, so a lot of stuff passed by me, but I loved her. And I thought she was a guy until she went to church one day and had to put on a dress. And I know she didn't like to go to church, but somebody talked her into it. She dressed up, and I can remember how shocked I was to see see her in a gray suit. I can still remember her gray suit and her heels, and how out of place I thought that was. What a shock it was to me to see her, but she was a female instead of a male. But it didn't change one bit the way I felt about her, because she would take me with her and let me ride her horse and talk about rodeo and herd sheep, and I thought she was about the best thing that God had ever put on earth. And I still just remember her with that kind of fondness.
Only thing I remember about her is she was going to shoot an apple off of Louise's head with a BB gun. She hit Louise in the forehead, and her forehead was bleeding.
I don't remember that. I don't remember that, and I can't imagine I'd have been dumb enough to have let her try it.
Well, I was hit in the forehead. Shooting.
Did you put something over your eyes?
I don't remember it at all. I don't know.
Oh.
Another thing that I loved about my memories of those early years were that Grandpa would let me just tag along with him by the hour. And he would put me on the big draft horses. And I remember the first time he let me help him water the horses. He'd keep his team there in the barn overnight so that he always had them for the next day. And so he'd feed them and water them, and they had to be watered after they'd eaten them. So I remember the first time he ever let me take one of those big draft horses out to the watering trough and water it. And as it came out of the barn, I mean, I was probably 4 years old, 4 or 5 is all I could have been. So I was tiny. That horse came out of the barn and got excited and just boom, went on, kind of leaped over the step, and away it went over to the watering trough. And at the time, I thought it was all fun and exciting. I think back on it and think I probably was in some danger had that horse gone over the top of me, but Grandpa trusted it, so I guess it was a trustworthy one. But Grandpa really, really nurtured my love for the horses and gave me opportunity to ride them and handle them. And Bud was part of that, part of my early growing up years, and I rode bareback, and I just thought I had the world by the tail when I was on him, or with Grandpa. Sometimes Mom would also, she would mow Christmas, and I would be staying at Grandma's, and Mom would say, you can stay until lunchtime, and when Grandma tells you it's lunchtime, you can come down to the field where I'm mowing, and I'll let you ride one of the horses back. So I would do that. I thought that was so much fun to go down and get on one of those draft horses and ride at home. One other thing that happened, I started school in Marion, and, Camas. I went to Camas, and my kindergarten year I really liked, and it was fun, and they did lots of art projects. But between my first kindergarten, first grade, there were several fires in schools in Salt Lake. And so on the news, you would hear these stories of these children being caught in fires, and maybe they weren't all in Salt Lake. Maybe it was just coming over the news, and I thought it was Salt Lake. But I became really terrified of going to school because I was afraid that the school might burn down and I'd be caught in a fire. And I got to where I wouldn't go to school. I just get so traumatized over the idea of it that I'd start to cry and panic and have a hissy fit, and my mother wouldn't make me go if I was in that state. And it went on for quite a while, and I don't know if she knew what I was afraid of. She probably did, but you know, I was having nightmares and hearing the news, and it all became just one big scary thing to me. And it was becoming a real problem. And my parents were called into the school, and they talked to the principal, and nobody knew what to do to get me to go to school. But that some people thought I should be forced, and some people thought I should have compassion and understanding. And then there was one wise aunt who stepped into my life, and she said, she bought this beautiful little horse skin that was hand painted, and she said, if you can go to school for, I don't know, maybe a whole month, maybe it was a week, I don't know, but she said, if you can go to school and not cry, this horse is yours. And you get to wear it every day as long as you don't cry and come home from school. And that was the trick that did it for me. I wanted the horse worse than I was afraid of fires. And Louise was the aunt who gave me that gift and changed my whole emotional. I came in control of my emotions, I would say, at that point in my life, in a way that I never had up until then. And thank you for that, Louise.
Oh, you're welcome. I don't remember that either.
Don't you? Oh, no, I do. That was really huge to me. I was baptized in Marion. I was sick that whole winter. I didn't go to school from about January until we moved in April because I was sick for a month or two. I got sick easy when I was little, and I was sick a lot that winter. And I think by the time I got well, Mom decided that there was no sense sending me back to school because I'd just been changing school. And so we moved to Idaho, and I was excited about it. It sounded like high adventure to me. And it was also sad to me to leave my friends, but since I hadn't seen them for 3 months, it wasn't as hard as you would think. When I got to Lava, it was excitement that I was just starting to be aware of my surroundings, who I was as a human being, and starting to be a little bit embarrassed by my housing conditions, and starting to just feel a little bit that maybe I was poor. I wasn't quite sure, but it started to feel that way. But when I moved to Lava, that really became an issue. And I used to think it was because I moved from Marion to Lava, and I now think probably it was more that I just was starting to gain some awareness of the world around me and my place in it. But nevertheless, it was exciting to me, and that we moved to Chief, and Paul was a brand new baby, and we had a car, that old black Chevy, and Mom drove the car, and I tended the baby, and everybody was picked in, and they were moving equipment and livestock and people to Idaho. The excitement was really high, and I think everybody was on a big high of it. Well, maybe not everyone, but everyone that I was aware of was pretty excited about moving to Idaho. I understand that it wasn't so exciting for Louise, Ken, and Doug. Jim was probably on board with the excitement of the move. But nevertheless, that was a huge change. In my mind, it was a dividing point in my life. It kind of changed from childhood to moving into responsibility and young adulthood in that move. That summer was really tough. The spring was great. They lambed the sheep. Now, again, this is from my perspective, and remember, I'm 8, so what do I know? But my life was good, and it was exciting, and everybody was working hard, and everybody was committed, and they lambed the sheep, and the summer farming started, and And in the course of that, we found out that there was not water. We did not have prior water rights. We had water rights, but not prior water rights. And that was still kind of going over my head, and it was not my worry, except that I could tell it affected everyone else in the adult world around me. And it became a real heavy burden for the family that we had bought that place that didn't come the way we thought it was coming in. So the rest of my life on the farm was dealing with that real shortage of water, never having enough. And that was a huge pressure and a big disappointment. And there was the court case concerning it and the losing that. And as those things were happening, my father was becoming more and more depressed and despondent and irritable. And my mom worked harder and harder and still kept having children. And in that, it engaged me. I was really involved inside the house, helping with my mom with responsibilities and tending children, and I was doing a lot outside, trying to be supportive, and my favorite job was outside. The thing that I probably, the whole memory of Lava and growing up, my favorite of all favorite jobs was going down to the meadow on my horse every day and bringing in cattle. We were doing artificial inseminating all of the cows and cattle, and it would be my job to ride through the meadow every morning and see who needed to be brought up and then bring them up. And in that time, I was got a horse from Earl Johnson. He knew someone, and he went and bought 2 horses, and that same man sent a horse down for me. And I don't know how that all happened. But I had always wanted a horse, and I had a little Strawberry that was really grandpa's, but he let me have her. She was a Shetland pony that came from Marion, and I loved her, but he sold her, and after he sold her, I would pray every night that I could have a horse. And there were always horses around there, but I never had my own. And sorry guys. But Earl Johnson went and picked up these horses, and they brought a horse home from Wyoming for me. It was Mr. Barnes. Mr. Barnes was the old rancher, and it was his daughter who owns the ranch, and she sent this yearly 18-month-old filly with me because it had been injured, and they decided they should keep it on the ranch, and she found out about me, and she sent it to me as a gift without having ever met me. And I'm sure her father had something to do with that. But that was old. And she was 18 months old, and she came and she had lice, and she was thin, and she was scraggly, and looked like a mouse, a giant mouse when she came. But those of you who remember her remember how beautiful she turned out. Or maybe that was just in my eyes, but no, she was a beautiful horse. And an answer to my prayer.
What was the name of the horse?
Cheetah.
Okay.
Cheetah. I can remember Cheetah.
Yeah. Yeah. We had other horses around, but yeah.
We can hear background noise. Somebody has family visiting in the background. So mute your phone if you're not Linda or not talking? Okay, go ahead, Linda.
Okay. That's probably all I need to say about that. She was my anchor through all my teenage years. Linda, this is Lena.
Yeah.
I don't really know how this man heard about you or anything like that. Mr. Barnes had moved to Lava, and he had grown up. I mean, he had owned a ranch, and he used to come down and work for Grandpa and Dad. He built some sheds, some lounging sheds and stuff like that. Sometimes he was big fence. And I had a shutter pony that I was riding at that time, and I was outgrowing it, and I think he just knew how much I loved horses. So he was the one who made the arrangement for the horse, I'm sure. He never talked to me about it. He probably did my parents or my grandfather. It may have been him and Grandpa who arranged it. I don't know. But he was the connection. Because his daughter had this horse. They raised these ranch horses. And it was just as they were starting to cross thoroughbreds with quarter horses. And on their particular ranch, they had brought in they had quarter horses, but they brought in a thoroughbred stallion. And so my mare was one of the first to come into our area that was of that nice quality, good moving animal, but still a good working animal. And she was probably 15 and a half hands tall. So it was big for quarter horses. He was the connection. Mr. Barnes was the connection. And his daughter owned this horse. It was out of her favorite mare, but she had been injured. She came running through their yard and ran into some big piece of equipment and jammed her shoulder up pretty good. And she always was a little stiff in that shoulder. But the more I would ride her, then the looser she'd get. So, in the beginning of the season, she was always a little bit stiff. But by the end of the season, you wouldn't know that there was anything wrong with her. And yeah, I weighed 80 pounds when I got her, maybe 70 or 80. So I was no burden on her either. So, but yeah, that I'm not sure of the details of that connection. For me, it was just I thought it's because I had prayed about it. But other people are the angels who make prayers get answered. So probably Grandpa and Mr. Barnes, and maybe my mother were involved. I don't know. I don't know the details. Does anybody? Maybe.
I don't.
I don't.
I think you got it right.
Yeah, in my mind it was still, I think that it was, everyone was involved, but it sure was a lifesaver to me. It really was.
This is Paul. The only thing I can remember when the horse showed up, and we asked where it came from, and I can remember Grandpa was there, and he said it got saved from going to the glue factory.
and
I know
that was true. Yeah.
And I know riding Cheetah, I didn't like to ride Cheetah very much because she went too fast.
Yes, you could run.
and she didn't want to stop.
That is true too. Yeah, I loved it. Loved it. But yeah, she was pretty fast, and she did like to run. And it was bred into her, and we probably trained it into her bones. And that was true. They would have colt her, and his daughter, Mr. Barnes' daughter, was out of her favorite mare. And she just couldn't bear the idea that it was going to the glue factory. I did learn that much. And so when she heard about me, she sent the horse to me. And she sent a pair of cowboy boots with her, which was amazing. I had that pair of boots the rest of my life, too.
So did your butt get glued to the horse?
It got pretty well glued to the horse. I came off of her a time or two, but not very much. And I didn't have a saddle. I did use her. I tried out for Rodeo Queen in McCammon a couple of years, and the first year that I tried out, I didn't have a saddle. And Mrs. Hill, I don't know if you remember Mrs. Hill, they had the Arabian horses. But she lent me a saddle when she found out that I was trying out for Rodeo Queen and I didn't have a saddle. No, actually, the first year I did ride bareback. The second year she provided me with a saddle, and I won first place or second place. I was first runner up the next year, but she lent me a saddle and helped me, with a few discreet things about queening, I guess. She was really helpful and so sweet to just reach out. She offered me a horse too, but I wanted to ride my own horse, but she did let me borrow her saddle, which definitely made me more competitive. And I have to tell you, when I was 4 years old, I decided I wanted to be a rodeo queen, maybe 3 or 4. I think I was probably 4. We were still in Marion, and we would go over to the, what was the town that was next to us where they had the rodeo and the...
Oakley?
Oakley, yeah. We went to Oakley. My mom made little cowboy shirts for all of us 4 kids, and we went to Oakley to the parade. And I saw Heavy Russell's daughter on a horse, a beautiful, beautiful horse, all trapped out in her finery, and I saw her and I said, oh, that's what I want. And somebody told me that she was the rodeo queen. And from that moment on, I wanted to be a rodeo queen. So that was my first introduction to what I wanted to be in my whole life.
Linda, she was my age. It was Renee, right?
Yeah.
She was my age, and at one point they lived in John and Margie's house. And Heavy was her dad was a horse trader, and they always had horses. And she could ride anything, any horse. And when I got back from my mission, she was a trick rider at the Camas Valley Livestock Show.
You're kidding? Oh my God!
And she was good. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. I just remember. I still remember. I mean, the horse I think was a chestnut, white stocking feet, ablaze, and ooh, it was pretty. I'm glad you filled me in that she continued on and did even more amazing things. I didn't know that a rodeo queen wasn't a career. In my 4-year-old mind, that was Linda. Yes.
Renee's horse is named Lucky.
Was it?
Yeah.
Linda, I am wondering if you have ever seen a horse you didn't think was beautiful.
Well, actually, I have, but I had deep, deep compassion for it. I always thought they had value, even if they weren't beautiful. I have seen some ugly ones.
all horses were beautiful. So, okay. Thank you for
They are. Their souls are. I will give them that. Sometimes their bodies are not as pretty. But
Okay.
mostly I love them. Yeah. Oh, okay. So last
It sure is.
was a real. Go ahead.
I said, it sure is nice to hear all these lovely things from Marion and Camus, and just makes me wish I could remember them all.
I wish you could too, because do you remember riding the horses when we had Bud, or not Bud? Well, yeah, we had Bud and Marion, and then Tang.
I remember Bud.
Okay, do you remember Tang in Flava? The little.
Yeah, a little bit. The name rings a bell. He was kind of a reddish color.
Yep.
Yeah, I can remember him a little. Not much about him though.
He was important to me. My life, I kind of have ordered by what horse was in it at that point. In those early years, Tang and Strawberry were there, and then I got Cheetah. So, and you were always riding with you and Jim and Doug, Ken, when he was around. I mean, everybody rode horses. I guess I just assumed it was the way life was.
Yeah.
We're just about out of time. Doug, I've only gone through 2 of Doug's questions, guys.
Well, do you want us to, Linda? Do you want us to feather you next week too?
We might have to. I didn't think I could even talk for 10 minutes. But look at what Doug's questions do to me.
Did we get to the horse feathers yet?
We got to some of them.
How many times did Cheetah fall? I remember Bimble's up.
He wasn't hers. Bimbo wasn't from Cheetah. I think Cheetah foaled 4 times. Her first one was Buff, right? This is the one. Yeah. Her first one was Buff, and then she had another one after that. And then when we brought her down here, she had Peanut and Sam, my two horses. Well, she had one more after that too. The fellow who had the stud traded me every other foal for breeding to the stud, and he got 1 foal, and then she didn't have any more after that. So I got 2 foals out of his stud, and they both were really excellent horses. They're the ones that Stephanie and I rode all through her childhood. So she not only took care of me when I was tiny, or when I was in high school, but then she went on, and her babies were in my family until after Stephanie graduated high school. So, yeah, maybe we just need to quit there. I don't know. One more memory I did have of Laban that was kind of different was that when I was growing up in our family, you got to take turns staying home. Somebody stayed home every day of the week to help Dad farm. And so, by the time I think I was in 5th grade, probably, they called in the truant officers to have a talk with our parents. I think they probably had to talk with our parents before that, but it had been very effective, and we were still missing a lot of school, and the principal was not happy about that, and so he had the truant officer come and talk to our parents. But I remember I was in the 5th grade, and I got called in, talked to the truant officer, and I was so stinking scared because they told me who it was, and I knew that he was the guy that took you off to the rehabilitation center, and I was scared to death. That's what they were going to do. I mean, I was just a kid, and I didn't know what was coming down the tube. But they talked to me, but I could tell that they wanted me to cry. They wanted to scare me so bad, and they just kept hammering at me, trying to make me cry. And the more they tried to make me cry, the madder it made me. And I almost did cry. I was so scared, but I didn't cry. And I think that goes right back to when Louise gave me the horse pin. I just had learned how to control those emotions, and they weren't able to make me cry. But we did end up going to school a little more after that, and they didn't haul us away. And Jim kept saying that he wished that they would haul him away. That helped me a little bit to have a little sense of humor. It took some fear out of it.
Seems like Dad told him we were smart enough. We only needed half the time anyway.
He probably did say that. Oh no, I don't. He probably did. That would have been something Dad would have said. But no, that was. I just remember that was really a scary deal for me. But and I always kind of resented the school that they would do that to me as a child. As I became an adult, I thought that was really a mean thing that they did to us as kids. It was one thing for them to deal with.